Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was recently tapped for Secretary of Health and Human Services with the Trump administration, and this has generated a lot of controversy in the media. But why? For those of us who follow Kennedy know that he has spent much of his career fighting against big corporations and corrupt government institutions who have in some way been very bad for our health. But does the mainstream media highlight this? Of course not. They're too busy running damage control for their advertisers, but calling RFK Jr. a litany of disparaging names while pretending it's really the Trump administration who's got it all wrong. So let's unpack some facts here and get this story straight. First, what is RFK Jr. actually planning to do? 1. Address chronic disease. Kennedy is determined to combat the alarming rise in chronic diseases such as diabetes, obesity, autism, and other conditions that have skyrocketed in recent decades. In America, 60% of adults live with at least one chronic disease like diabetes, heart disease, or cancer, while 4 in 10 suffer from 2 or more. So this is beyond requiring attention. It's a full-blown crisis. 2. Overhaul food safety standards. More than 1,600 ingredients used in American foods are banned across Europe, Canada, and other nations due to safety concerns, and over 72 pesticides used in U.S. agriculture are also prohibited or heavily restricted around the world due to their health and environmental impacts. Kennedy argues that this is a result of corporate influence over regulatory bodies like the FDA. 3. Reduce corporate influence over regulatory agencies. Kennedy plans to tackle the deep-rooted issue of corporate capture in American health agencies. This includes eliminating conflicts of interest, such as corporate funding of regulatory bodies and health studies. Today, nearly 45% of the FDA's budget comes from pharmaceutical companies. Over the last year, this amounted to $3.3 billion, creating direct financial dependency. Another $1.1 billion directly funded clinical trials, with studies indicating that industry-sponsored research is 4 times more likely to produce results favoring the sponsor's drug. 4. End medical advertising in America. Full stop. Big Pharma spends approximately $6.6 billion annually on direct-to-consumer ads in the U.S. This is the only wealthy country besides New Zealand to have strict regulations where these ads are legal. However, this is not primarily done to sell products. This is done to buy silence and complicity from media outlets dependent on pharmaceutical ad dollars. 5. Implement vaccine safety testing. Contrary to popular misconceptions, Kennedy does not advocate for the removal of vaccines. Instead, he demands rigorous safety testing because, since liability protections were introduced in the 1980s under the Reagan administration, no long-term safety tests have been required for any vaccines. Kennedy's stance isn't radical. It's about demanding the same basic safety protocols applied to other medical products. He's asking for accountability, not abolition. 6. Exploring alternative therapies. RFK, like most of us who have done extensive research in this field, support the inclusion of innovative treatments like psychedelics, peptides, and stem cell therapies into mainstream healthcare. Kennedy argues that these could provide groundbreaking solutions for chronic conditions if regulatory barriers are eased, and he is correct. Next on the list, revising water fluoridation policies. Kennedy questions the necessity of fluoridating drinking water, suggesting that the mineral is readily available in other forms like toothpaste, if required at all. To support this claim, a widely referenced meta-analysis conducted by researchers from Harvard and China Medical University reviewed 27 studies on fluoride exposure and its effects on children's cognitive development. The analysis provided strong evidence that high levels of fluoride in drinking water impairs cognitive development. It revealed that children in areas with elevated fluoride exposure had significantly lower IQs, averaging a reduction of 7 points compared to children in low fluoride regions. And finally, number 8. Enhancing transparency and public trust. Through reforms, Kennedy aims to make health agencies more accountable, reduce the influence of lobbying, and ensure that public health decisions prioritize citizens over corporate profits. And here's why. In 2022, pharmaceutical companies spent $36 billion on payments to doctors and hospitals under the guise of marketing or consulting fees, blurring the line between medical advice and a sales pitch. As a result, prescription drugs are the 3rd leading cause of death in the United States, contributing to over 100,000 deaths annually. All this while the global pharmaceutical industry rakes in over $1.5 trillion a year, with the American market accounting for approximately 40% of that total. Now, if you're still convinced that America's health system does not require a sledgehammer-style overhaul, let's take a quick look at the state of affairs. Over 42% of Americans are obese and nearly 75% are overweight. Almost half of the country either has diabetes or is currently pre-diabetic. 1 in 5 adults is living with a mental health disorder. 1 in 5 kids is obese. Autism is skyrocketing, now affecting 1 in 36 children. For reference, this number was 1 in 10,000 in the 1970s. And this is wild. 80% of military-aged Americans are considered unfit for service, primarily due to obesity, poor physical fitness, or poor mental health. There has been a 30% rise in deaths from heart disease over the past decade, and life expectancy has dropped to the lowest it has been in decades, now sitting at just 77 years, the lowest in all developed nations. Despite these staggering statistics, the U.S. continues to spend more on healthcare per capita than any other nation, at over $12,000 per person, yet its health outcomes are the worst in the developed world. Something is very wrong here, and it's not a mystery. It's because these systems, food, pharma, and healthcare, are rigged against us. They profit more when we're sick than when we're healthy. And this is not a conspiracy. The statistics are very clear. This is what RFK Jr. is fighting against. He's not saying he has all the answers, but he's willing to take on the machine that's been poisoning us, lying to us, and making us pay for our own misery. And he's got a track record of success. So, if you're opposing Kennedy's approach, what is your solution? Because the status quo has created a country where kids are developing type 2 diabetes at the age of 10, where life-saving drugs cost a fortune, and where corporations have more control over your health than you do. RFK Jr. represents a glimmer of hope in a system designed to keep us unhealthy and dependent. And if you care about your health, your kids' health, and the future of America, I believe you should be supporting him too.